All right, we're ready to begin lesson 6. From this point moving forward, the lessons are a little bit longer, and I find that for some they're a little bit more difficult because once you start getting into actual Hebrew words, especially if they're 3 and 4 syllable Hebrew words and more sentence structure, a lot of people get a little more overwhelmed. It's a little easy at the beginning. Lessons 1 through 4 usually go pretty fast, and this is about the time people start getting overwhelmed. The main thing you want to do, if you've never had exposure to Hebrew before, is make sure that you're learning the letters, the sounds that the letters make, and the sounds of the nikudim, the vowels, and being able to decode Hebrew. But if at the end of this process you only know the sounds that the letters make and the sounds of the nikudim, and you really are struggling with reading out loud, if you've never had exposure to Hebrew before, that's pretty good because then you can go through the series again, or you can move into whatever area of interest you have that is the reason for you learning the Aleph Beit, whether it be conversational Hebrew, modern Hebrew, biblical Hebrew, Yiddish, Ladino, and you can practice with decoding, getting better at decoding out loud there. But the main purpose of this is to learn the Hebrew Aleph Beit for those who've had no exposure to it before. And if you've had exposure to it before, then the letters will probably be a quick review, and you'll probably work on getting better at decoding out loud, at reading out loud. Okay, so let's go ahead and get into it. Lesson 6. All right, we have some new letters. So let's see. Let's kind of go down and let's look at our new letters. So we have kuf, and kuf makes the K sound. Kuf. One thing I would also, kuf does make the K sound, but real quick, kuf is often transliterated, I found in Hebrew, because there's another letter that makes a K sound and can also make a guttural sound. It makes two different sounds depending on whether or not it has the dot in the middle of the letter, and we haven't got to that yet. So kuf can make a K sound, but kuf is often transliterated as a Q in English instead of a K, because the other letter that can be a K sound, it's usually transliterated as a K in English. And I think that this is done to distinguish the two letters, let you know. I can sometimes look at a transliterated word and figure out what letter is being used from Hebrew based off of the transliterated choices. And I just find that kuf is usually transliterated as Q. And so that might be another way to think of it. And I've actually heard, I've been in beginner courses where they've taught kuf as a Q sound to differentiate from another letter that we're going to meet later on. So that's just something to consider. So it makes a K sound, K. Final nun. So we learned nun last time. This is final nun. That means if a nun is at the end of a word, it's going to look like this. And notice how far it goes below the line. It's a long letter and it dangles down. Okay, we have our new vowels, and we have this, and we actually haven't learned this letter, but this is actually a letter of the Hebrew Aleph Beit called a vav. And a vav we'll learn makes a V sound, but a vav also acts as a vowel. And when you have the dagesh, the dot in the middle, it has the sound of oo, as in boo. And that's also one of those, if you're a lot of transliterated resources for Hebrew, they'll teach that vowel as a U sound. But here they're trying to emphasize the sound that it makes. They're not even really worrying about what it's called or anything of that nature, and they want to make sure that you understand the sound is oo, and a lot of times it's transliterated as a U sound, and they want to make sure that you're making the correct thing. And the reason I'm mentioning this is because most people I know who are interested in Hebrew have picked up resources along the way that they've never actually really gotten into, and if you were to go back and look at those, I don't want people to look at it and say, well, why does this say it makes a U sound and the book says it makes a oo sound? Just there are differences in the way people transliterate the sounds of Hebrew into English. And I have a bookcase that I can see in my peripheral where I have Hebrew books for instruction from the early 1900s through the 1950s, and they use all sorts of things. And I know for myself, I acquired a lot of books that were supposed to help you learn Hebrew, but I didn't have anyone to help me with the initial learning the Aleph Beit early on. And so I think that once I started learning Hebrew, I started going back to those books and those resources, and I would find sometimes the way they would teach the sounds were very different than the way I was being taught. That they would, like the kuf being transliterated as a q, or this particular nikud was often called the u because they were just thinking of the English vowels. So just be aware of that. And I apologize if I've gotten you off track. Okay, and another combination, and that is when you have this nikud with a yud, and it has the sound of ooey, has the sound of ooey. Okay, so now we're going to go up and let's look at our keywords. So remember, we go down and over. So key douche, key douche, and kiddush would be the blessing over the wine for Shabbat and for holidays, kiddush. And then we have ya yin, ya yin, and ya yin means wine. So kiddush is the blessing over the wine. Kiddush means to sanctify, to make special or set apart. Okay, so we go down here and we read our little story. On Shabbat and holidays, we lift up a cup of yayin and say the kiddush blessing to make the day special. Long ago, kiddush was said only at home before the meal. Later, we began to say the blessing over yayin during the Friday evening service. Why? Because travelers often stayed in the synagogue for Shabbat and ate their meals there. Joining them for Kiddush was one way the community welcomed its visitors. Because yayin cost a lot of money, one cup was shared by all. This custom is still followed in many homes today. And you see we have over here a Kiddush cup, which a lot of us who are Jewish have in our homes. It's a popular gift for bar and bat mitzvahs. So they have a Kiddush cup. Real quick about pronunciation. This is one of those words, kiddush, that you don't hear a lot in synagogues because most synagogues, being made up of Ashkenazic Jews, use the old Ashkenazic pronunciation where you emphasize the beginning of a word and not the end. So kiddush is often called kiddush. And they'll say, okay, we're going to do kiddush now. And that's one of those things, I know what kiddush is. And I remember the first time I ever heard someone in a synagogue actually use that pronunciation, the proper Israeli or Sephardic pronunciation of kiddush. They said, okay, it's time for kiddush. And I think everyone was like, he doesn't know how to say it. And it was funny because the guy was a young rabbi, but he had just come back from Israel, where you have to study for a year in Israel. And so his Hebrew pronunciation was correct according to the Israeli way of saying it. And kiddush is the proper way according to this book, but most people would probably be familiar with it as kiddush. Like, okay, we're going to do kiddush because that's the Ashkenazics emphasize the beginning of the word, the beginning syllable, and not the ending. So just a little thing. If you ever, sometimes you'll come across a word and it's like, that doesn't sound correct because you've heard it, but you've heard it with a different accent. And I'm not even saying that Israeli accent or Sephardic accent is the correct one. It's just that's usually the style we teach. But then there's a lot of words in Hebrew that even if you know the proper Sephardic style of pronouncing it or custom of pronouncing it, you still hear it pronounced with an Ashkenazic accent. Okay, so the next page. All right, remember our keyword is kiddush, so let's practice. Ku, u, bu, su, hu. Okay, 2. Nu, do, you, gu, mu. All right, 3. Anu, kadu, hayu, dagu, hamu. All right, 4. Kumi, shuki, numi, muki, kutsi. All right, let's go down a little bit more. All right, 5, zud, yud, gush, dug, tush. All right, 6, natsud, ziyud, dagush, adug, natush, and 7, and it's going to be 3 syllables, yakumu, yatsumu, kaninu, yatsizu, yagidu. And real quick, let's look at 7, yakumu. Ya is a syllable. The next syllable would be kuf and our new nikud, because you have to have a nikud. You have to have what people call a vowel. In the book, they call it a vowel. Other people would disagree, but you have to have one of these symbols to separate between syllables. So this is a syllable. Kuf is not a syllable by itself. It has to be attached to a nikud. And so this would be the next syllable here. So ya, ku, mu. And that's why, as Mark Golub in his Hebrew series, which you might want to find on YouTube, I don't think the whole thing's available on YouTube, but there's a lot of good introductory resources. He says the secret to being able to decode or read Hebrew is to remember to go down and over, down and over. And that's what I always say. If you get overwhelmed by a word, especially if you have like a 4-syllable, or even you'll have beyond that with Hebrew, because there's a lot of prefixes and things that get attached to Hebrew, is to just go down and over. And especially at first, you might find that sometimes you're emphasizing the wrong syllable, like maybe you're emphasizing the beginning and not the end, or something like that. If you're trying to do Sephardic pronunciation or Israeli pronunciation, the main thing is to just get used to being able to go down and over, and you'll get quicker with that process. But it is a process you'll have to just kind of learn and work with. And again, introduction to Hebrew Aleph Bet. If this is your first time, it's going to go a little bit slower. The main thing is to learn the letters and the sounds. Okay, so our cool Hebrew word is shuk. So shuk right here. And actually, shuk would be one whole syllable. Even though it's 3 letters, it's one whole syllable. So shuk, that's marketplace. All right. So we have our keywords, kiddush and yayin. Now we're going to practice with some final nun. Okay, 1, nan, man, gan, kan, yan. 2, okay, now we have the yud, but remember it's attached to that to the vowel before it, the nikud before it. Nin, min, gin, keen, yin. And I know this can be confusing because we have the yud, and we have here the nikud, and then we have a yud. So this makes the Y sound, but this doesn't. This makes the Y sound because the nikud is underneath it, but this makes no sound because it's attached to this nikud. So it's yin. We've emphasized the Y sound here, and then this kind of blends into this nikud here. So it's yin. All right, 3, shanun, imun, nigun, tikkun, ziun. So this is a 2-syllable, so it's z, and the yud is attached. So this would be our first syllable, zin, and then un. Un is our next syllable. Okay, 4, ganun, Sorry, I missaid that. Ginun. Ginun. So gi, nun. These three letters, nun, our nikud, and our final nun, are all one syllable. Ginun. Tamun. Tigun. Shikun. Mi'un. Except for this last one, the rest of these are two-syllable words that have three letters. And that's just important to kind of for pronunciation. Okay, 5. Bring it down a little bit. Okay, 3 syllables now. A-mi-ti. Amiti. Aguda. Aninut. Agida. Ashinut. All right, 6. Remember, we have the ui when you have the yud attached with this nikud. So, minui, nikui, shinui, mitsui, ginui. Okay, 7. Din, dan, dayan, diun. Remember, this yud is attached here, so the syllable breaks here. Diun, nadun. Okay, and our cool Hebrew word is gan for garden. So Gan Eden is the Garden of Eden. Okay. So keywords, kiddush and yayin, and they have some. They want you to practice writing the nun and the final nun, and so that's one of those things to understand the difference. See how nun takes up the whole line, but a final nun goes below. Same thing with kuf. Kuf, the tail kind of goes below, and that's just something to practice. Okay, and let's go down. It says circle every cup that contains the sound of the letter K. So you would circle all the kufs. Write the correct nun in the following words. So you have to decide, am I going to write a final nun? And in Hebrew, just in case you look up other sources, in Hebrew, a final nun is pronounced nun sofit. That means the final in Hebrew, sofit. Same thing with, we're going to see mem later on, mem sofit. It's the final form. So nun sofit, or the final nun, they want you to practice, they want you to practice writing the right one. So if it's at the very end, even if it's near the end, that doesn't matter. You always write a regular nun, but only if it's the last letter in the word. So yayin, you would do a final nun. Dina, it's the name Dina. You would not do a final nun because there's a hey after it. Dani, you would not do a final nun, just a regular one. Dan, however, Dan is the last letter, so it would be final. I'll let you practice on this cup. All right, read the combinations below. So you're going to read these letters with the final over here. So you have noon, moon, boon, yoon, tune. Over here you have goosh, hoosh, koosh, moosh, and noosh. All right. I know it's a bit of a longer one. All right. So remember, we have kiddush and yayin. It says color purple the spaces with words that have the sound of N, and color silver the spaces with words that have the sound of K. And you can do that and make a nice little picture or collage. But this is what I would do, like when I was we were going over this with my mother. She's not going to pull out the colors and start coloring. So what we would do is we would just kind of go down to practice our decoding, and we would just kind of go down the line. So we would just practice. We would practice reading and reading out loud. So Abba, Ima, me. These are all words that we're somewhat familiar with. And then we have some that we're not. And we would just go line by line down and practice reading. So that might be something to help you get a little quicker with your decoding. It says you put the yayin, you'll know that, in the silver object every Friday evening and recite Kiddush. So you have to have a little Jewish knowledge to get that. All right. New vocabulary. Okay, ma. Ma means what is. So remember that we've learned me. Me is who. Ma is what. So we're going to play a little game now. Me, meaning who, or ma. Fill the blanks with the best question word. Look back to page 33 if you need help. Okay, so we have chair. Would I say? I would say ma. What is this? We have a little toddler. Would I say ma? What is? Or would I say me? Who is? Let's say me. Car. I'd say ma. We go down again. We have a little boy. We would say me. Who is this? With a very old style computer, we might today all of us say, Ma, what is that? With the woman, we would say, me, who is this? With the old 90s cell phone, mobile phone, we might say, Ma, what is this? Okay, and you can do the rest. Okay, we have that prepare for prayer thing again. So it says, play this game with partners or class teams. One person on team is X and the other is O. Take turns reading the Hebrew in any box below. If you read correctly, mark the box with O or X. The first to get 4 boxes in a straight line, up, down, or sideways, is the winner. And since I've always worked with adults, do we play this game? No. What we do is we just take our time practicing our decoding. So we would just go straight down the line. Say Yayin, Shana, Anu, Kamu, Dean, mean. If you have people who are interested in playing the game, play the game, but I would say practice your decoding. That's the main thing. Practice your decoding, your reading out loud. Okay, and that is it for now. Okay, so I know it's a little bit longer than lessons like 1 through 4. I know 5 was pretty long, and sometimes I stop and explain certain things, and if I do that and I get you off track, I apologize. Just remember the whole thing, being able to learn the Aleph Beit, to learn the sound of the nikudim so that you can read and decode, and then practice those pages that are just of words with decoding out loud. And if by the end of this you can read Hebrew out loud, you know what the sound that a letter makes, even if you're still kind of struggling. I've heard people, they get kind of hard on themselves in beginner courses, because every beginner course I've sat in on, there were people who were just refreshing some Hebrew, and they could decode a lot easier and a lot quicker than people who were learning it new for the first time. So if you're looking at those and I'm going through these and I'm reading them out loud and you're not near as fast on your own, that's okay. The goal is for you to learn the Aleph Beit and the sound of the nikudim, the sound of the vowels that go along with it. And even if you have to, you pause. My mother remembers, I remember, I'm sure she does, she was telling me about the first time that she actually read the word Torah. And figured it out for herself. We were in a synagogue and they had the Torah scroll, and on it says Torah in Hebrew, and she was kind of doing and trying to figure out, and it took her a moment, and then she's like, oh, Torah, the Torah scroll says Torah on it, and she was so happy. And what you have to understand is that you're going to be going around after you learn the Aleph Beit and you kind of slow down, then you'll start hopefully seeing things with Hebrew letters, because hopefully you're interested in this for some reason, and you'll start just doing that. Like you have the workbook here, and there's these apples with little Hebrew words on it. And I remember one time we were sitting in the library doing a study session with, I think it was my mother, and my father was there. And my mom started just kind of looking and trying to pronounce the words on the front of the book. And we weren't doing a specific thing. I don't even think we were doing Hebrew. It was Shabbat. We met for Torah study. And she just started kind of doing that because you have the skills. I'm a middle school teacher, but I teach at a school with elementary school students. And I know the first grade teachers talk about when they would teach phonics, um, that it's so exciting once first graders start learning to actually decode letters, that they read everything. They stop and they'll see, what's on the door, what's on the sign. They say sometimes you don't want them to read everything, but they don't always know what they're reading, what it means, but they're reading everything. They're just walking through the halls and they see letters everywhere. And so once you learn the aleph bet and the nikudim, you obviously are interested in this for some reason. Hopefully you have something else in your home, even if it's just the book itself, and you'll see Hebrew and you just start kind of practicing saying it out loud, just because it's a skill. And you find that you're practicing it more and more. If you go to synagogue, or you maybe do Shabbat prayers on your own, maybe you'll find that you start looking at the Hebrew side of the page and start trying to decode that. Maybe you have a Bible that's in Hebrew. Maybe you have a children's book that's in Hebrew. I recommend that, by the way, getting some like basic kids books in Hebrew. If you're learning this for Yiddish, there's some basic kids books in Yiddish. I have a couple of kid books over here that are like 100 words in Yiddish, 100 words in Hebrew, same aleph bet. I don't know of anything in Ladino yet for children. There's one book, but it's in transliterated, so that really wouldn't help you with reading it. But just you'll find that you're just reading everything, decoding everything. We say reading, we mean decoding. You're saying it out loud. You might not know what it means yet, but you're practicing and you're getting better at that. And so just keep that in mind. Okay, that's it for today.